Earlier today, a mock draft was released by Bleacher Report linking the Detroit Pistons to Cody Williams. We'll talk about his fit with the Pistons and what we can expect in the upcoming draft in just a moment.
Passing lane, skies a jam. Dynamite dunk and the crowd loves it.
Welcome back to Pistons Intellect. I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Kelly_313. You can follow us over on Instagram at Pistons_Intellect. And as always, if you're feeling so kind, please hit that subscribe button. Now, first of all, before we get into today's show, I just want to highlight that I'm currently away from my usual setup at home. I'm down the beach on a semi kind of holiday / vacation. So forgive me if the audio isn't great or it's not as good as normal, but I just wanted to obviously highlight that because the background's a bit different. And yeah, this is a bit of a bootleg setup, if you could see how I'm set up here. So anyway, into today's show, as I mentioned off the top, Bleacher Report released a mock draft earlier today. I'm recording this on Thursday here in Melbourne, Australia. By the time Friday, by the time you're seeing this in the US, in Detroit, or wherever you may be, it'll probably be Friday morning or Saturday morning for my folks here in Australia. But Bleacher Report's latest mock draft had Cody Williams mocked to Detroit at 5. And the piece of information within the mock draft, which I posted about on my Twitter and over on Instagram, as well as the Pistons community were kind of talking about, was the note here from, I believe it's Jonathan Wasserman, who does all Bleacher Report's draft analysis, mock drafts. He's kind of their draft insider. He's of the draft people. For me, it's kind of like Jonathan Gavoni from ESPN, Sam Vecini from The Athletic. There's the No Ceilings crew. You shout out to them. Go follow them on Twitter and everywhere else. And there's Wasserman from Bleacher Report, and I'm missing someone else. But his mock drafts are kind of, there's Kevin O'Connor as well from The Ringer. So his mock drafts kind of hold a lot of weight in the community. And he put today in his piece, rival teams continue to predict that Cody Williams will be picked earlier than most expect, potentially by the Pistons at number 5 or the San Antonio Spurs. So we haven't yet at least I don't feel like gotten any real insider information. Like, we've gotten stuff from James Edwards in some of his pieces, which we certainly should take seriously is not the right word, but which do hold a lot of weight. But apart from James and kind of the beat reporters, kind of feels like we haven't gotten anything from a national perspective. So to have Cody Williams linked to the Pistons and for Wasserman to move Cody Williams number 5 on his board, I think means something. And, I think that piqued the interest of a lot of Pistons fans, good or bad. I noticed after my post on Twitter, I got there's like a little Cody Williams hive who were like, I've been talking about Cody Williams since the tournament or whatever. And then there's a whole heap of contingent of fans who are worried about Williams being a project. And I'm going to talk about the type of player he is just in a moment, just to give everyone a brief summary. But a lot of mixed opinions amongst the Pistons community on Cody Williams. But when you look at Williams, he's 6'8" wing, 7'1" wingspan. He averaged with Colorado this past season 12 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists on 55% shooting from the field and 41% from 3. I will note that was on very low volume from 3. But at least Wasserman, what he says here in his blurb is, the pitch to Williams revolves around a coveted big wing archetype, his efficiency at Colorado, and the belief that he has the mentality and blueprint, being Jalen Williams' younger brother in Oklahoma City Thunder, to continue improving and maximize his potential. Williams would be an easy fit in Detroit, either at the 3 or 4, particularly if he gets close to his 41% three-point shooting percentage from college. Now, as I just mentioned there, the three-point shooting and a lot of the shooting stats are on low volume, but he was efficient. So he kind of has not the quickest release, but to me, he kind of just feels like a project player, which I think is fair to say. That's what I've read about him. It doesn't feel like a day one impact guy. And in previous drafts, like this is the sort of guy I'd like the Pistons to go for. The higher upside player on the wing who has all the physical measurables. And, in 3-5 years' time could be a real starting core piece of a winning team on the wing. Like 6'8", 7'1" wingspan, like this is literally my favorite archetype of player. But this is the kind of battle I'm having this draft, and with the position the Pistons are in is I dropped my mock draft on Pistons Intellect yesterday, and you might have seen it on Twitter, but I'm kind of targeting win now type players, which is something I do not normally do and definitely haven't done in the past through the past few draft cycles with the Pistons. I've gone for more long-term, higher upside players, but this draft I have like Reed Shepherd, Dalton Connect, Donovan Clingan, all in my top 5. And it's a internal battle I constantly have, because when I'm looking at someone like Cody Williams, there's so many exciting elements to him as a player, and it like I said, it piques my interest with the type of player that I want on my team. So it's tricky. And the other element to this, aside from my kind of personal opinion, is that Trajan Langdon, who clearly is currently running the show for the Pistons while they don't have a general manager, it feels like Herb Jones and it feels like Cody Williams is the type of player he would love, the archetype. I just mentioned one then, but two of his biggest gets in the draft when he was with the Pelicans were Herb Jones in the second round and Trey Murphy in the late first round. Two guys with very similar measurables to Cody Williams, two guys who are the prototypical 3-and-T type of wings, which Cody Williams projects to be. So it kind of should come as no surprise that Williams would be a player that Langdon would be interested in, and that could be where this buzz is coming from that was mentioned in the Bleacher Report article. And look, James Edwards said a couple of weeks ago in one of his pieces, and I spoke about it on here, like Cody Williams seems like the type of player Langdon would be interested in. So that's not to say the Pistons, none of this means that the Pistons are taking Cody Williams, and I still think there's heaps to play out in the next 2 weeks, but yeah, those are my kind of thoughts on it. I'd love to know your thoughts on the Cody Williams type thing. Forgot to bring up this here, but let me know your thoughts on Cody Williams at pick 5. It does feel like a reach in the sense of a lot of mock drafts I've looked at. Cody Williams is not at pick 5. I think a lot of fans are going to say, what about Stefan Castle, as well as Dalton Connect and some of the other wing prospects. But I think the difference between at least Williams and Castle from Connect is the defensive side of the ball. Connects, I think Castle, off the top of my head, 6'6", but I have a feeling he's got more length than someone like Connect, who's 6'6", and isn't the most rangy prospect and hasn't shown a lot of defensive potential so far. So, but then the offensive side Connects like a day one ready-made type of scorer. So let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear some names. And mainly on wing prospects you're looking for the Pistons to take. I know a lot of fans are obviously got Reed Shepherd. And I'm talking right now in the mindset that Sa and Ricochet are off the board. Feels like they're not going to go to 5. They won't get that far. So, let me know your thoughts on who the Pistons should take at pick 5. Moving on, the other topic I wanted to discuss on today's show was surrounding who could replace Monty Williams. So if his time in Detroit comes to an end, which we're still yet to find out about, it feels like this is the domino to fall before we hear from Langdon in a press conference to have him introduced. We're still yet to have that, and I believe it's now been 2, maybe even 3 weeks since that announcement was official from the Pistons. So Troy Weaver, obviously, a couple of weeks ago was let go. The Pistons parted ways. Now, Monty Williams, it feels like, to me, my gut feel is all over the place. Part of me thinks it makes sense that he's gone, and they're just working out the arrangements for some sort of buyout, or maybe Monty maybe they're trying to find a new role for Monty. I don't know. Not a buyout, because we heard that Monty's not doing that, but just something to do contractually that's kind of slowing this down, or yeah, or maybe the conversations. Part of me thinks maybe he's coming back for next season, and he's going to get at least the first half of the season to prove he can coach this team to some wins. But I've spoken about the Monty Williams thing at length. But what I wanted to talk about today was kind of some of the candidates who could replace Monty. And Sean Corp of Detroit Bad Boys, SB Nation, shout out to them. I used to write there, and I'm still part of the team over there. So Sean put out a really good piece, and the link will be in the description here, just around some of the names who could enter the conversation for the Pistons head coaching position if it becomes available. Now, the first name he mentions here is James Borrego, who I spoke about, I think, last week, but Borrego, currently the associate head coach with the New Orleans Pelicans. He spent, I think it was 3 seasons as the head coach of I was going to say the New Orleans Hornets, the Charlotte Hornets. And I really like this here. This is a quote from Sean's piece. Borrego was never able to get over the playoff hump in Charlotte and was dismissed, but he was 43-39 in his final season with the Hornets. The Pistons haven't had 43 wins since 2015, and only that one time since 2008. So, it just goes to show that because I know when I spoke about Borrego and put some stuff on socials about him, a lot of fans were like, well, he hasn't had playoff success, he hasn't done this, but he kind of nurtured a young Hornets team to 43 wins. Now, they had more talent. They had Miles Bridges, who was up and coming at that point. They had LaMelo Ball as a rookie, and they had definitely some other talent, Terry Rozier, but it wasn't a stacked roster. So 43 wins, I think I understand why people want kind of a coach that's coming in with some playoff success, maybe championships, whatever. But we kind of had that with Monty last season, and look how that went. So I have a bit more of an open mind about this kind of stuff. And Borrego, for me, I would love if he was the Pistons coach. I kind of just think it would make a lot of sense. I think the Pistons shouldn't be probably looking for a really established head coach who's had multiple stops. Like I said, we just had that with Monty, and saw how that played out. There's a certain stubbornness that with those guys who've had success elsewhere that would worry me coming into a situation like the Pistons. So, Borrego makes a lot of sense to me. The only issue is he's currently going for the Lakers job, and he is a finalist for the Cavs vacancy. So Pistons might not even get a chance to interview him, but I wanted to mention him nonetheless. And he was at the Pelicans as the assistant head coach while Trajan Langdon was there. So there's a tie there, which I mentioned last episode as well. Another name to keep an eye on is David Alderman. So he's a bit of a young and up-and-coming assistant coach. He's currently the lead assistant with the Nuggets under Michael Malone. And he would probably, this would be a first-time kind of gig for him. He's the son of Rick Alderman, who was kind of known for his offensive kind of schemes, I think, with the Sacramento Kings, those early 2000s Kings teams. And his son David seems to have a lot of those tendencies as well. Now, it's important to note he's had a player like Nikola Jokic at his disposal who's going to make any offense a top 3 offense in the league or top 5. But to hear a coach with kind of some offensive juice and creativity, I feel like that's something we've been lacking in Detroit for a long time. So a name to keep an eye on there for sure. Now, another name is Chris Quinn, currently an assistant with the Miami Heat, has been for the past 10 seasons. And he was a name that came up last year in the Pistons head coaching search, but I remember in talking to some people last year that he was never a finalist in the Pistons job, and it never really got close. But I know he's a name that Pistons fans were really excited about. I was personally. So he's been under Eric Spoelstra for the past decade. So that in itself is quite the apprenticeship or traineeship for the role. He's been heavily linked with the Heat's player development, which once again, another area in the past 10 to 15 years the Pistons have struggled with is developing young players. The Heat have found players anywhere in the draft, out of the draft, G League, and developed them into starters, if not stars. So yeah, that would be a name I'd be super interested in. Once again, first-time head coach, which it's kind of didn't scare me last season, but after seeing how we went once again with an established head coach, I'm much more open to the idea of a first-time head coach. Particularly one that's, like David Alderman and Chris Quinn have just been on teams that have made the finals and won a championship. Like they've done their time. I would feel comfortable in them. This isn't a JJ Redick situation. I think this is a lot different, clearly. But yeah, the last name I wanted to mention here was Kenny Atkinson, well known for turning around that Brooklyn Nets team in the mid 2010s to getting them from basically the worst position an NBA franchise can be in terms of having no draft assets and no real high draft picks or star players. He helped turn that team in that had Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell, Karis LeVert, and some other players, Jared Allen. He brought them from a team that kind of had no direction to making a couple of first round playoff appearances. And they were a really fun team, the Nets. There are some questions Sean raises here around his age. He is nearly 60 years old, so he's kind of on the older side. And there is, if you look at kind of what some Nets fans have said in the past, there are some questions about his schemes offensively and that kind of thing. He's definitely more of a developmental coach. It feels like that's the feel I get from reading things. But hey, maybe, I'm not. If Kenny Atkinson was the coach tomorrow, I wouldn't be. I think I would still be pretty confident in that decision. So I think that was 4 or 5 names to keep an eye on. There's been no real reports around this. Obviously, Sean's just written a really interesting piece here. There's a couple of other names there I haven't read out, but I'll put the link to that piece in the description here. So definitely go read it. Go support Detroit Bad Boys over at SB Nation because they do excellent work and have great coverage. But that's kind of, there's some of the names. I think to me, honestly, it goes just from those names. If I did a power rankings, it would go Borrego 1, I think Quinn 2, Alderman basically 2B. Then I would probably have Kenny Atkinson. So those are the 4 names, but I think all 4 of those would be fine candidates. But as I mentioned, I think leaning towards a bit of a younger coach makes more sense, at least for right now. If Monty Williams is in fact, if he does depart the Pistons. So let me know your thoughts on those names. I'd be very interested to hear them. But unless we get any breaking news over the weekend, which I said this last week, but it feels like Fridays are the day, or Saturdays for us in Australia. But it feels like Fridays are the day we get breaking news with the Pistons. So maybe tomorrow we're going to get some form of news out of the Pistons. So it's going to be very interesting. So unless we hear anything tomorrow or across the next few days, I'll be back for you guys Tuesday. But until then, as always, go Pistons.